Mark Twain once said that history does not repeat, but it rhymes. Any logical look throughout human history, we will see the repeated pattern of birth, expansion, maturity, and eventual death of empires throughout the ages. The life cycle of empires and the new ages of man are nothing more than cunning men dominating nature and their fellow man with unsustainable collective paradigms. In the beginning, in order for man to survive this harsh earth, humanity had to band together in tribes to bring about collective effort necessary to feed, protect, and reproduce. They used collective effort to divide labor and thrive. They first learned how to pack hunt stronger animals. Then they learned to work with nature to harvest crops and build permanent shelters. In time, cunning men saw that there was more wealth to be had in dominating their fellow man than there would be in dominating the earth. These men soon saw that with violence, or at least the threat of violence, they could yield far more energy out of their fellow man than they could holding a sword to a plant and screaming at it for that to give them more. This gave rise to the psychopathic warrior class and eventual empires. Tribal wars and slavery proved to be a bloody effort that had diminishing returns. While conquering new lands gave rise to much new treasure, it wasn't sustainable. Then these cunning men came up with a new scheme, to have these slaves willingly sacrifice themselves to the cunning men at the top. They saw that, like their animals, free-range animals produce much more goods than caged animals. These cunning men devised religions and soon declared that there was an angry God in the sky that demanded their obedience. Soon the slaves sought to work harder to satisfy this angry God in the sky. And in some cases, these cunning men actually declared themselves God in form of pharaoh, king, and emperors. These cunning men became the chosen ones, and anyone that would follow them would reap their harvest.
Египтом, вот нам говорят, правили фараоны. Да фараоны это были мальчики, несмышленыши. Реальными правителями Египта было древнее египетское жречество. И вот они, владея тайными знаниями, которые принадлежали только им и которые они скрывали от остальных людей, они позволяли манипулировать сознанием не только неграмотной толпы, но и самих фараонов. Как там жрецы охмурили даже самого фараона и убили его, владея знаниями о затмении солнца.
Everybody can see that it is a massive bank theft perpetrated with taxpayer subsidies, and yet the CEO of Goldman Sachs over the weekend now claiming he's doing God's work.
Well, you know, first of all, when I was at Goldman, we didn't have prayer meetings before deals. So,
you did or did not?
The whole God's work thing is a little odd. And you know, I think they do understand the anger. I truly do not think they care.
Once these cunning men had sufficiently indoctrinated their people, like a cancer, they were never satisfied and soon spread. They soon sought about enforcing their divine will upon other tribes. This is more or less the age of written history, and ever since then, Mark Twain was right. We have rhymed the same bloody history from epoch to epoch.
And so to every sailor, soldier, airman, and Marine who's involved in this mission, let me say, you're doing God's work.
Empires would rise and fall in the name of religion, king, nation, and more recently, corporation. All run by cunning men trying to live beyond nature and become masters of their own universe. Every 80 years or so, or 4 generations, we seem to have a systemic crisis, a crisis for which our entire way of life hangs in the balance, and that there is no certainty in its outcome. For example, in the American experience, Americans won their freedom from their European masters, thus ending one collective power for an albeit different one. 4 generations later, they were slaughtering each other in the Civil War that left 860,000 men dead. 4 generations after the Civil War, we were in the depths of the Great Depression and World War II, that claimed an estimated 48 million casualties worldwide. In each of these great crises, it was never certain that America would go on to exist. Now, once again, it is 4 generations later, and we face an even larger threat to our way of life. There is yet another cycle that has rhymed recently, the so-called business cycle. This cycle is when the economy ebbs and flows with debt, boom to bust. In 1965, President Johnson took the silver out of our money.
le fait que beaucoup d'États acceptent par principe des dollars au même titre que de l'or pour les règlements des différences qui existent à leur profit dans la balance des paiements américaine, ce fait entraîne les Américains à s'endetter et à s'endetter gratuitement vis-à-vis de l'étranger, car ce qu'ils lui doivent, ils le lui payent, tout au moins en partie, avec des dollars qu'il ne tient qu'à eux d'émettre. Étant donné les conséquences que pourrait avoir une crise qui surviendrait dans un pareil domaine, nous pensons qu'il faut prendre à temps les moyens de l'éviter. Nous estimons nécessaire que les échanges internationaux soient établis, comme c'était le cas avant les grands malheurs du monde, sur une base monétaire indiscutable et qui ne porte la marque d'aucun pays en particulier. Quelle base? En vérité, on ne voit pas qu'il puisse y avoir réellement de critères, d'étalons autres que l'or.
And nearly 7 years later, Richard Nixon cut the last tie to the gold standard in 1971. This put us on a pure fiat debt-based dollar standard, with which there was no hard asset backing the value of the dollar. You see, paper money came into existence as a receipt for the real wealth. Now the cunning men had taken the real value out of our money, and now we were trading worthless receipts. This decoupling from the gold standard was in part the beginning of the petrodollar trade, where the cunning men in the West conspired with oil-producing nations to dramatically raise the price of oil under the guise of a concocted oil crisis. Under this conspiracy, oil-producing nations would only trade oil for dollars, thus securing the dollar's world reserve currency status. For this reinvestment of petrodollars back into the U.S. economy, in return for military protection against the Soviets at the height of the Cold War. This has led to a series of crises every 7 years that we've moved to a more unsustainable monetary system that would binge and purge assets and debts every 7 years. Starting with the 1973 oil crisis, we went until the stagflation crisis in 1980, where inflation got so bad that the privately owned Federal Reserve had to raise interest rates to close to 24%. 7 years later, we had the famous 1987 stock market crash that cost almost $500 billion to the U.S. economy. 7 years after that, we had the 1994 bond market massacre that destroyed $1 trillion of bondholder wealth. 7 years after that, we had the 2001 stock market collapse that led to $4.6 trillion in losses. 7 years after that, we had the housing bubble and the 2008 economic collapse.
On Thursday at about 11 o'clock in the morning, the Federal Reserve noticed a tremendous drawdown of money market accounts in the United States to the tune of $550 billion was being drawn out in a matter of an hour or two. The Treasury opened up its window to help. They pumped $105 billion in the system and quickly realized that they could not stem the tide. We were having an electronic run on the banks. They decided to close the operation, close down the money accounts, and announce a guarantee of $250,000 per account so there wouldn't be further panic out there. And that's what actually happened. If they had not done that, their estimation was that by 2 o'clock that afternoon, $5.5 trillion would have been drawn out of the money market system of the United States, would have collapsed the entire economy of the United States, and within 24 hours the world economy would have collapsed.
Which it is estimated that there were $12.8 trillion in losses. And now we're on the verge of the next 7-year cycle, and this one coincides with our even larger 80-year societal crisis. Why is it that we seem to be on this insane trip throughout all human existence? Why do the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? Why must we always have wars and live in debt to our fellow man? Why can't we ever seem to break this cycle of history and enter into a new golden age of humanity? The answers to these questions and many more are found in this movie. Carl Jung once said that you can never solve a problem with the same consciousness that created the problem. We must see the world anew. Even George Orwell wrote that mankind will never be free until they become conscious, and until they become conscious, they will never become free. Now, cunning men would like to distract you into collectivist solutions for these collectivist problems. They will tell you that it's a moral problem and that we need more religion. Or they will tell you that it is a financial problem and talk of tax cuts or redistribution of wealth.
Facilitate some redistribution because I actually believe in redistribution.
They will tell you it's a political problem and roll out new candidates every few years. And when the problems get so large, the cunning men will say that there's some foreigner is the problem and start beating the war drums. If you were to remember one thing in this movie, remember this: there are no collectivist solutions to unconscious collectivist problems. There are only conscious individual solutions, like that of Silvershield in this movie. The problem we face throughout all of humanity is not political, financial, religious, or military in nature. It is a battle of our consciousness.
When you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. But life, that's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. And the minute that you understand that you can poke life and actually something will, if you push in, something will pop out the other side, that you can change it, you can mold it. That's maybe the most important thing, is to shake off this erroneous notion that life is there and you're just going to live in it, versus embrace it, change it, improve it, make your mark upon it. I think that's very important. And however you learn that, once you learn it, you'll want to change life and make it better, because it's kind of messed up in a lot of ways. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
Or more accurately, our unconsciousness. It is about what we actively or passively support in our day-to-day living. The values, the structures, the men that we support with our votes, our consumptions, our corporate or military careers. We empower them. They do not control us. We have unconsciously accepted the fallacy of scarcity, collectivism, and dominating nature and our fellow man. These are the core reasons why humanity keeps repeating the sad history of debt and death. If we must see the world anew, then the logical solution must be individual, conscious, resonating abundance.
The first thing you do, you must know exactly what you want in this world. When you know exactly what you want, make as lifelike a representation as possible of what you would see and what you would touch and what you would do, and physically moving in such a state. While sitting in my chair, I would feel myself right into the situation of my fulfilled desire. And having felt myself into that state, I would not let it go. I would keep that mood alive, and in that mood, I would sleep. You know, people are totally unaware of this fantastic power of the imagination. But when man begins to discover this power within him, he never plays the part that he formerly played. He doesn't turn back and become just the reflective life. From here on in, he is the affecter of life. The secret of it is to center your imagination in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and remain therein. For in our capacity to live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled lies our capacity to live the more abundant life. Most of us are afraid to imagine ourselves as important and noble individuals, secure in our contribution to the world, just because at the very moment that we start our assumption, our senses deny the truth of our assumption. We seem to be in the grip of an unconscious urge, which makes us cling desperately to the world of familiar things and resist all that threatens to tear us away from our familiar and seemingly safe moorings. If I would make a living representation of the state desired, and then enter that state and abide in that state, I would realize it. But in essence, it's simple. You simply know what you want. When you know what you want, you are thinking of it. For what a man sees when he describes his world is as he describes it relative to himself. So what the world looks like depends entirely upon where I stand when I make my observation. So if, as I describe my world, it is related to that point in space I imagine that I am occupying, then I must be there. I am not there physically, no, but I am there in my imagination, and my imagination is my real self. And where I go in imagination and make it real, there I shall go in the flesh also. When in that state I fall asleep, it is done. I have never seen it fail. So this is the simple technique on how to use your imagination to realize your every objective. The abundant life promised us is ours to enjoy now, but not until we have the sense of the Creator as our imagination can we experience it. Persistent imagination, centered in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, is the secret of all successful operations. This alone is the means of fulfilling the intention. Every stage of man's progress is made by the conscious, voluntary exercise of the imagination. Then you will understand why all poets have stressed the importance of controlled, vivid imagination. Listen to this one by the great William Blake. In your own bosom you bear your heaven and earth, and all you behold, though it appears without, it is within, in your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow. Try it, and you too will prove that your imagination is the Creator.
The earth has far more than enough for humanity to thrive if we live sustainably. Humanity has much more in common with each other than these cunning men would like us to know. And the individual can now see the world as it is and consciously choose to get off this mad rhyming trip throughout the ages. Not only to shield you from the coming collapse, but to create generational wealth large enough to establish a new conscious, resonating way of life. Now I want you to know something. This is not pie-in-the-sky utopian talk. I was once somebody that profited very much off of this debt and death paradigm. I went to Boston College. I spent 7 years in the Marine Corps Infantry, and I was a successful business owner. And when I came face to face with the truth that I'm going to share with you in this movie, I had to walk away. I could no longer do what I did, knowing what I knew now. The process was very difficult, but ultimately it was the best thing that I've ever done. So I'm going to let you know that I have walked the talk, and I have made radical changes in my life to shield myself and those that I love. I've spent more than a decade studying and thinking about these questions, not only to describe just how messed up this world is, but how one can break this cycle. And half of that time I've been trying to wake up others to this reality. With my epic Sons of Liberty Academy, and the past 4 years here on YouTube with The Greatest Truth Never Told. But with this final movie, I'm done reaching out, because at some point, which I feel is very soon, it will either become too late or too dangerous to speak such truth. With the verge of the next 7-year crisis and the 80-year societal crisis upon us, there is little time left to teach and learn, much less prepare. While the challenges we face are great, one cannot deny that we're reaching a quickening in the consciousness of humanity. It took thousands of years to move past hunter-gatherer to an agrarian society. It took centuries for us to move into an industrial society. It took decades for us to reach a technological society. It took years for us to reach an informational society. Now it is time for us to reach the final age of man, one of a fully conscious society.
If you have a golf ball-sized consciousness, when you read a book, you'll have a golf ball-sized understanding. When you look out, a golf ball-sized awareness. And when you wake up in the morning, a golf ball-sized wakefulness. But if you could expand that consciousness, then you read the book, more understanding. You look out, more awareness. And when you wake up, more wakefulness. It's consciousness. And there's an ocean of pure, vibrant consciousness inside each one of us. And it's right at the source and base of mind, right at the source of thought, and it's also at the source of all matter.
With the advent of the internet, there is no excuse for humanity to still be functioning on this low level of consciousness. No excuse to empower the cunning men at the top that sap our energy and spread their sickness with debt and death. And soon, with the single largest event in human history upon us, with the dollar collapse, there will be no excuse to not question what we as a humanity have been unconsciously doing with our short time here on Earth. Over the past 4 years here on YouTube, I've created over 1,000 videos trying to help others to see what I see. More importantly, I want to give them the confidence to take the kind of action necessary to shield themselves and their family from the next great upheaval in society. With this final effort, I'm leaving you with this movie to try to help others who have not been exposed to the greatest truth never told. This movie, while it is long, is only a few hours of your life, and the culmination of 10 years of study, and the essence of 1,000 videos here on this YouTube channel. I promise you that it is well worth your time, and if I'm successful, it will be life-changing. It is said that men go mad in herds and only come to their senses slowly and one by one. Charles Mackay. It is my hope that with this one movie, we will consciously arouse the unique individual inside all of you. The one that has been beaten into collective submission by cunning men that seek to take your life's energy. So you can light the fire inside of you. To logically see the world is truly messed up, but your life doesn't have to be. I ask you that you not only give this movie time, but recommend it to others, as I am sure it is the most effective means of unraveling thousands of years of collective unconscious indoctrination. Please rate, comment, share, and subscribe. And I now present to you the Silvershield. I have identified 5 stages of awakening. I feel that it is incredibly important for you to know this process so as to make the most of each stage and get through them as quick as possible. This entire project is centered on this process, and I have taken great care to put the information in the order that I wish I had learned it. I feel this will allow the individual to deal with a new reality in a safe environment that also ensures a successful awakening. The awakening process mirrors Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, which many of you might be familiar with. The reason why they mirror is because it is literally your old self dying, so that a totally free, new self can be born. Your body will physically and mentally react as if there was a real death in your life. We identify ourselves by what we do, what we wear, and what we drive. When you are awake, none of that will matter. You will transcend the current consumer order and be fully prepared to deal with a new paradigm. I feel it is incredibly helpful for you to understand this process, to not only identify where you are, but where you should be going. I cannot stress to you how important and necessary this process is. If you do not start thinking for yourself, you will be without the skills necessary to survive a post-dollar world. The first stage in the 5 stages of awakening is denial. In this stage, you will dismiss anything that goes counter to conventional wisdom as crazy talk or conspiracy theory. This is really a self-defense mechanism the brain uses to protect the ego. No one likes to admit when they're wrong, much less admit that they have been fooled. So it is infinitely easier to deny a truth rather than it is to embrace it. It is easier to mock than debate. It is easier to hide under the sheets and pretend that there is not a monster in the room. This is where most of our society is stuck right now. They believe that whatever the authorities tell them is the truth. They go along with the crowd in fear of being looked upon as strange or crazy. In my experience, denial comes in two forms. First is the most common and least dangerous form of denial. It is just not wanting to know the truth that might upset their happy little life. This innocent denial of ignorance is bliss mentality is held by so many Americans who think that things are going swell for them, so why ruin it with the truth? There was a woman I was working with that literally shut down on me when confronted with the truth. She literally said to me, "I do not want to know because that reality is too scary for me." This form of denial is the easiest to overcome because when things go wrong in their perfect little world, they will have no more excuses to not look for the reason why their world fell apart. There is no more bliss for them to remain ignorant. The economic depression and the political failures of both the Bush and the Obama administration have already shook a great many out of this denial. As long as people believe in absurdities, they will continue to commit atrocities. Voltaire. The second kind of denial is one that is much more pernicious. I view it as guilty denial. This is the denial of people who are actually benefiting off of the illusion of our paradigm. This comes from business owners, government employees, and others whose livelihood is derived off of the current debt paradigm. These people actively fight against the truth through disinformation or saying they just can't keep it a secret or that's just crazy conspiracy talk. They would rather create a plausible deniability to distance themselves from the reality of their actions or inactions. Their aggressive defense of the illusion shows me that they know what they are doing is wrong. They are too afraid to live outside of this paradigm, so it is better to try to hold it together despite its human costs. Anger is just a cowardly extension of sadness. It is a lot easier to be angry at somebody than it is to tell them that you're hurt. Thomas Gates. The second stage of the awakening is anger. When you start to see that you were fooled, you react violently for being taken for a fool and you want to lash out. This action is ineffectual in bringing about positive change for the freedom movement. In my experience, those that propose violence are probably working for the government just trying to find some sucker to frame.
You're a fucking cop, the three of you! Go on, it's our line! It's a peaceful demonstration!
Anger is a very natural reaction and is one that you must go through rather than suppress. Finding out how the world really works is akin to finding out your significant other has been cheating on you. You may have remained faithful to what this country was about while atrocities were committed behind your back. Anger is just covering up the fact that you are really hurt for being taken advantage of. This stage is often the shortest, but it is also the one with the most energy is expended. In my anger stage, I redirected my anger to fuel an intense amount of research into making sure that I was never fooled again. It eventually led to the creation of this project. The third stage of the awakening is called bargaining. After you calm down, you start to reach out to anybody who will listen to tell them what is really going on. This is the most annoying stage of the awakening process. And remember that you are reaching for people who are still in the stage 1 of denial. You end up ruining Christmas parties talking about World Trade Center 7 or kids' basketball games talking about the Federal Reserve. By reaching out and sharing, you are not really trying to awaken people. You are really looking for help. By reaching out, you are seeking guidance or structure in your own search for truth. You know that there's something wrong. You know that you can't go back to your ignorance. Without clarity, you cannot move forward, and this naturally leads to the next stage of depression. The fourth stage of the awakening is depression. Now that you've reached out to everybody and nothing seems to happen, depression sinks in. You start saying, "It's too big. What could I do about it?" The worst kind of depression that permeates the freedom movement is the arrogant attitude of "I know it all" or "screw everybody, I don't care." This is the most painful stage and the hardest one to get out of. Human happiness comes from progress, and yet progress in this journey seems to suck you further into a hole. Unfortunately, there's no way around this, yet it is absolutely necessary that you go through it. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And where it has gone, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Frank Herbert. The fifth and final stage of the awakening is acceptance. This is the point where you now become comfortable with the oncoming reality, and you actually take active and positive steps to prepare for this. This process of making wise choices for yourself and others will yield massive positive personal results. These positive results will reinforce your actions and bring about more positive change in your life. People will start to notice the light in your eyes has returned, as confidence returns. They will now ask you what had happened to you, and those that once did not want to hear the truth will be ready to listen. This is ultimately where we all need to be, both personally and as a movement. I really feel the reason why I've been so successful at waking people up is that I do not try to scare them and depress them. Trust me, I can write doom and gloom with the best of them. Fearmongers do not want you to logically think. They want emotional reaction to their preconceived notions. I do try to motivate, encourage, and enlighten people in order to take the first step into their highest and best self. This journey is the most important one you'll ever take, and it is the only hope to ever becoming what you were meant to be, free and independent. We have already seen most of humanity does not really think, and that most of our lives is controlled by men who do think. In this next awakened paradigm in history, man will need to embrace, I think, therefore I am free. Believe nothing, no matter where you have read it or who has said it, not even if I have said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and your own common sense. Buddha. What you are about to embark upon is unlike anything else that you've ever experienced. We will set about on a journey that will take us through history and challenge everything that you've ever learned. The reason why this is going to be very different from any other educational experience that you've ever had is that I'm going to insist that you question and critically think about the information I am presenting to you. Do not accept anything I say unless you can confirm it and that it resonates with something in your soul. There, you will begin to become totally free. I do not claim to have all the answers, but I do seek to ask all of the questions. My hope for this project is that it becomes the intellectual foundation for a new era of humanity. We can reject the paradigm that is built on spreading debt and death. We can set about creating a new paradigm where people are free to play on a level playing field for all to rise to their highest and best selves. I have been influenced by many, and I do not claim to be the originator of most of the ideas I present to you. My unique ability is to bring together the big picture for all to see. The truth is that humanity has been enslaved over and over again throughout history, and that we can be free the moment we wish to be. This journey will be a dangerous one, in which if I'm successful, will result in your old self dying, so that a new, totally free person can be born. All know the way, but few actually walk it. I have gone through this journey of awakening. I have lived the life of individual opulence, and I have lived the life of collective poverty. I now see the middle path very clearly, and it has led me to my highest and best self. This is without a doubt a life-changing experience, and if enough people grasp the concepts that I present, it could lead to a new era of humanity where freedom rings. Once you are aware of how the world really works, you will no longer be played the fool in your relationships, investments, and thoughts. I have seen that those that are most successful in life are not necessarily the smartest or hardest working individuals. For the most part, they were just in the right place at the right time. This project seeks to give you absolute clarity to take massive action in your life, to prepare for the greatest paradigm shift in human history, the mathematically inevitable collapse of the dollar. This is not simply an American struggle, this is a struggle for all of humanity. And I want to be absolutely clear, I do not just want to scare you and feed you full of doom and gloom. There is a way out, and I would not bring you on this journey if I had not made it through myself. If I could leave you with one piece of advice before we continue on, it is something I came up with that helped me tremendously throughout my own journey. Listen to all, follow none. You cannot solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. You must learn to see the world anew. Think about all that is wrong with the world today. Massive debts, endless wars, encroaching government power, too big to fails, systemic unemployment, and a general sense of fear and depression. You cannot solve these problems with the same consciousness as the ones that created this mess. You cannot cure a debt problem with more debt, restructured debt, or bailouts. You cannot solve war with more war, cyber war, proxy wars, or covert wars. You cannot control the power of the government with new politicians, laws, or lobbying. You cannot solve unemployment with more funding for education, more regulations, or strikes. In order to solve these and all other problems that plague our society, you need to create another consciousness. The men that own and control our world know that so long as humanity either actively or passively has the same consciousness as them, their power is secured. They know that as long as humanity remains short-sighted, narcissistic, meddling little people searching for instant gratification, those at the top have nothing to worry about. It is only when we become caring, logical, and independent people with the opposite consciousness that we can effect real change upon this world. Think of when you were a teenager trying to establish your independence. You might have huffed and puffed around the house to get what you wanted, and depending on what kind of parent you had, that might have worked. When you think about it, you didn't really want a car or to stay out late as much as you wanted your independence from your parents' paradigm, to do what you wanted to do, to make your own mistakes, to be free from others controlling you. This is what we want in all of humanity. To live our lives, to love who we want to love, to do what we want to do without others interfering in our lives. Most teenage rebellion is misguided and often never really results in any true freedom, since they never change the consciousness of the dependent state. And parents never solve the problem by not changing the consciousness from the controlling state. Even the most well-intentioned parent really has no clue of what will make their child happy. So why bother trying to control them? As long as they're not in mortal danger, parents should just let go. The child can only begin to find out what will make them happy by following their passions independent of their parents. Slamming the door, yelling, or the quiet treatment will not result in you gaining any real power. The only way for you to gain true freedom of your parents is to become independent of them, to think and provide for yourself without their help or even approval. That is what becoming an adult is all about. Your parents probably did not respect you as an adult until you acted independently from them. Even that might not do it. But regardless if your parents respect you for your independence, you know that you can survive and thrive outside of their paradigm, and all of their attempts to control your life are now rendered useless. Some parents might still try to control you, but they usually get relegated to holidays and only in a symbolic fashion, because you know you don't have to listen to them anymore. Don't believe them, don't fear them, don't ask anything of them. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Think about what you are really upset about in the world today. It could be war, taxes, the government encroachment on our privacy, or whatever. You'll waste time hacking at the branches and not the root of the problem. What you really want is your freedom and independence and to be left alone. The fundamental reason why any formalized group effort like Occupy Wall Street or the Tea Party will fail is that it is a collective effort against a collective problem, one of the same consciousness. You cannot beg for power. You need to be independent of power. Sending good people in to reform a state is like sending virgins in to reform a whorehouse. Anonymous. The game is rigged, and nothing will change with elections, protests, editorials, Occupy movements, or Tea Parties. They are important, but they will not change the system. The boomers tried to rebel in the 60s against all that was wrong in the world.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
They lack the mature wisdom to guide them to the root of their problems and to become a real threat to those that seek to control them. If you want to become a real threat to the system, act independently of the system. This is essentially what a responsible citizen must do to a repressive government. Slamming your door at your parents' house is the same as a million-man march. You think it is a show of power, but those that are in charge think it's a cute but meaningless exertion of power and do not fear it in the least. Let them march all they want, so long as they pay their taxes. Alexander Haig. You must physically, financially, politically, intellectually, emotionally, and even spiritually remove yourself from their control. The most potent weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Stephen Biko. You cannot change the world to make yourself happy or free. You must change yourself to make the world happy and free. Be the change that you wish to see in the world. As long as humanity believes that they can change the world to make themselves happy or free, we will continue to fall into this trap over and over again, generation after generation. It is insanity to think that you can change the world to make yourself happy or free. You can't do it on a personal level, and you certainly cannot do it on a national or a global level. Think about your own family. You share the same race, religion, education, and so on, yet there's constant disagreement. I can't even control my 3-year-old son. So what makes us think that we can somehow change the world with 7 billion people with different outlooks and motives on life? No matter what you try to do to affect change in the world, you inevitably run across others who do not share your same vision. And because they come from different experiences, education, and awareness as you are, they will naturally become an opposite force. They will naturally push against any effort you have, and this ultimately devolves into a middle-of-the-road solution that leaves no real change, a lot of wasted time, energy, and money. This also gives power to the parasitical middlemen that manipulate both sides to their advantage. True independence can only come from within. We knew this on some level when we were teenagers, but we fell for what the world and our masters offered as freedom. College degrees, big houses, fast cars, consumer products, shallow relationships, or gurus. This inevitably leads to debt, frustration, and an empty hole in our lives, which we usually do not fully realize until we are way past our prime, wasting the best part of our life. The only thing in the world that you really can control is you. So stop trying to change others. Be the change that you want to be in the world. It is very important to know that we also have no right to enforce our version of freedom and happiness onto others. No matter how much you feel you are right, people must come to their own decisions on their own terms and timetable. When we focus our time, energy, and money on working on our own personal freedom, we will not only see real effective change, we will show the way for millions of others to follow. When you are truly free, you'll be strong, happy, and independently powerful. Your power does not come at the expense of others or control of others, and therefore cannot be stopped. True generational wealth is when you can learn how to become totally free and pass that freedom on to others. Fear of the unknown is always worse than the reality that we face. Think about the scariest horror movie you've ever seen. The first time you watched that movie, you weren't necessarily afraid of the blood, the screaming, the axe murder. What you were afraid of was the unknown. Not knowing when they were going to jump out of the closet, not knowing what was going to happen next. But even the most scariest horror movie, when you watch it the second time, it becomes less scary because you know what's going to happen. And what if we went a little bit further and then we actually watched the behind the scenes and how the movie was made?
Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
What if you could see the actor that was playing the bad guy?
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
Having fun with the director.
To get out, that's why you shouldn't be hauling ass in that lane. It's very dangerous.
And that all the blood that you saw was all just fake corn syrup. And that the mask that you were afraid of was just a rubber mask. Or that the set that gave you such fear was actually a backlot studio. You might actually learn so much about that movie that the next time you see it, you can actually laugh at what once scared you. Well, think about what's going on now. The horror story is the end of this paradigm, the dollar collapse, the end of the world as you know it. And yet the only reason why you're really afraid of it is because you don't know what's going to happen. I can tell you, the more you study it, the less fearful you'll become of it. The more you can prepare for it, the further ahead of the curve you can get, the better chance of success that you're going to have. And that once you get through this knowledge and understand how it happened, why it happened, and where it's going to end, you can actually start looking forward to a new paradigm. In order for the elite to keep control of humanity, they must keep us in a constant state of fear. Fear of war, fear of money, fear of politics, fear of status, fear of looking stupid, fear of being different, fear of not being good enough, fear of losing your soul, fear of whatever. They keep us in fear because only then can we be easily controlled. There are two important elements to free your mind from this trap and live life fearless. Number one is education. I have seen a lot of fearless people who have no clue, so education is very important. The elite will teach us sex education, drug education, death education, and political correctness in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades. but they'll never teach us how our money works or what our founding fathers really fought for. This institutional ignorance is done to keep our heads down so that you're easily controlled. They do such a good job of this in school that you eventually keep yourself down. You don't really fear war, markets, or anything else as much as you fear the unknown. This educational journey that you're taking right now is taking the scariness out of the world. By understanding economics, politics, and psychology, you start to see that the world is less scary. I prefer dangerous freedom to peaceful slavery. Thomas Jefferson. Just like if you saw the behind the scenes of a scary movie, you would start to learn how fake that scary movie was. Well, that is what this project is all about. A big behind the scenes look at our very scary world. What could be more scary than the horrific possibility of a worldwide dollar collapse? This single event will have more effect on humanity than any other single event in human history. Quadrillions in wealth will be destroyed. All commerce will end because there will be no money to do business with. Food and fuel will stop being transported. Social chaos will ensue, leading to massive uprisings in all corners of the world. Nations will most likely go to war over natural resources. In short, our highly connected world will fall apart and millions, if not billions of people will die of starvation, disease, and war. Pretty scary stuff, huh? It is only scary if you're not aware and prepared. The second thing that is most important for you to become fearless is to really believe in yourself. This is not some Stuart Smalley daily affirmation, although this guy is now a United States Senator. It is a real, deep, educated belief in yourself, the kind of belief that you will only listen to your inner voice and ignore all other voices that are trying to hold you down. To really believe that you are special, that you do have a purpose, that you're not going to let anyone or anything hold you back from your destiny. Having the ability of the trivium to rationally observe, logically think about a solution, and having the ability to explain and persuade other people about your idea will get you through a majority of life's problems, or at least keep you ahead of the crowd. It's kind of crazy to think that most people in your own personal life really don't want you to succeed. They don't do this because they're really against you. They do this because they're not really for themselves. They're afraid that somehow your success will make them look or feel bad. Misery does love company. When you see that the ones that are trying to hold you back are fearful little people, it makes it so much easier to step out on your own. The reality is there are a lot more forces out there that are for you than there are forces against you. Your job is simple. Decide and commit to what you are going to be and walk that path the best that you can. Once you walk fearless, people will recognize this in you and help you realize your goals. I am living proof of this, and I hope to inspire others to take this journey too. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Lao Tzu. Once you're aware and prepared, getting to your desired goal is as simple as taking that first step in confidence. Write down where you want to be and what kind of life you want to live. Really take some time to think about what your ultimate goal in life is. It might help to think what would make you a compelling movie if you were the main character, or what would you want to be on your deathbed. It doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be real with you. What would your life look like if you were fearless? What would your family look like if you lived life with passion? What would our communities look like if you inspired others? What would our nation look like if we were once again the land of the free and home of the brave? When you see this progression, you see that we're not really fighting to change the world to make us free or happy. The answer has always been inside of us. We are the masters of our own mind and world. It is impossible to think that 7 billion people trying to manipulate others on what people should do is a rational plan for happiness. No one knows what will make themselves happy, much less anyone else. If we saw that in our own mind is our freedom and happiness, and left others to find their happiness, the world would be a better place. Once you fully accept this as your definite chief aim, no one on earth can hold you back. And only then will you be able to live life fearless. All children start out naturally curious and love to learn. When they are sent to school, instead of learning, it is a repeated process of memorizing and regurgitating information. The better you are at regurgitating this information, the better you will do in the school system. The real education is obeying authority. We are taught to ask permission. We are taught not to think outside the box. We are taught multiculturalism, drug, sex, and death education. We are taught to memorize, regurgitate information, an input-output process not unlike a computer or a slave. We are taught to respond to a bell, just like a factory floor. We are taught to keep our head down and just make it through the day. We are taught to lower our expectations, and that is just school. Outside of school, our communication is destroyed as people literally lose the ability to speak and relate to one another. Our financial education is one of slaves encouraging debt. Our political system is one of false choices. Our media is normalizing narcissistic behavior. We are not taught to develop critical thinking. We are not taught about debt-based money and the principles that our founding fathers fought for. We are not taught to cooperate and view each other as a team with individual talents and gifts. We are not taught to question authority or even the facts demanded of us. We are indoctrinated, not educated. Indoctrinated like little slaves. The secret of American schooling is that it does not teach the way children learn, nor is it supposed to. Schools were conceived to serve the economy and the social order rather than the kids and the families. That is why it's compulsory. As a consequence, the school cannot help anybody grow up, because its prime directive is to retard maturity. It does it by teaching that everything is difficult, that other people run our lives, that our neighbors are untrustworthy and even dangerous. School is the first impression children get of society. Because first impressions are often the most decisive ones, school imprints kids with fear, suspicion of one another, and certain addictions for life. It ambushes natural intuition, faith, and love of adventure, wiping these out in favor of gospel of rational procedure and rational management. Between 1906 and 1920, a handful of world-famous industrialists and financiers together in their own private foundations handpicked university administrators, house politicians, and spent more attention and more money towards forced schooling than the national government did. Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller spent more money than the government did between 1900 and 1920 on education. The system of modern schooling was constructed outside of the public eye and outside the public's representatives. In our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. The present education conventions of intellectual and character education fade from their minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive folk. We shall not try to make these people, or any of their children, into philosophers or men of science. We have not to raise up them as authors, educators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, all of whom we have ample supply of. The task is simple. We will organize the children and teach them in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way. John D. Rockefeller. The aim of public education is not to fill the young of the species with knowledge and awaken their intelligence. Nothing could be further from the truth. The aim is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level, to breed and train standardized citizenry, to put down dissidence and originality. That is the aim of the United States. H. L. Mencken. This lowest common denominator citizen is most useful in a corporate, military, or a welfare state. Corporations, governments, and militaries do not deal with dissent effectively, so it is in their best interest not to have participants that question anything. When I joined the Marine Corps, they didn't beat around the bush about this idea. In boot camp, they wanted instant and willing obedience to orders. Everywhere else in your life, you will learn the same lesson, only more subtly, and this is why military men are most sought for corporate jobs. Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils left school, they shall be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking and acting otherwise than their schoolmasters would have wished. Bertrand Russell. Our education system is centered on an input-output process of information. Our success or failure depends on our efficiency of taking what the teacher tells us and then regurgitating that same information onto an exam. Those that are able to blindly regurgitate information the best are rewarded with higher grades. They are told that they are smart, when in fact they are just thoroughly indoctrinated. This input-output process is no different than a computer or what a slave does. You give it a command, and it just does it, without question. This system was carefully created to mold us into what we are today. The masses blindly flow through this education system and naturally fit into centralized systems that want good, little, obedient workers who take orders without question. We all know that person who is very smart, or indoctrinated, that excels in a corporation, military, or government job, and yet they lack any real street smarts to see what's really going on in their lives. When you understand that their mind only functions on what they are told, it becomes clear to you that they are only able to be successful in a centralized system where taking orders is a way of life. I think, therefore I am. It is a classical philosophical statement on human consciousness and existence. But what about the people who do not really think? Do they really exist? This input-output mindset is reinforced outside of school and the career world. Our society is all about what is popular. From early on in our lives, we are pressured into doing what's popular and not what's best for you. This is a way a collective gets individuals to sacrifice what is unique and special about themselves, to become the lowest common denominator in a group that really doesn't care about you at all. The most brilliant propagandist technique will yield no success unless one fundamental principle is born in the mind constantly. You must confine itself to a few points and repeat it to them over and over again. Joseph Goebbels. When you look at our news or political debate, it is driven by talking points where they're repeated with such accuracy it's scary.
Talk show host Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be able to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television. Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on his late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television. Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night TV.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope once again on late-night TV.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien is looking to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night TV. Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope.
If this works for late-night TV, what else could this be good for?
And make no mistake about it, if and once Saddam has nuclear weapons, the terror network will have nuclear weapons.
Terrorist. It's the third time I've said that. I'll probably say it 3 more times, see? Terrorist. In my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again.
Nuclear weapons. Clear weapon.
For the truth to sink in.
That we have America.
To kind of catapult the propaganda.
Nuclear weapons. Nuclear bombs. Nuclear weapons. Nuclear bombs. Nuclear of 100 nuclear bombs. Nuclear bombs. Nuclear arsenal. Nuclear tinder bombs. Nuclear know-how without nuclear infrastructure. Bombs.
Tool of terror.
And a countdown. Torture. To a potential nuclear nightmare.
To kind of catapult the propaganda.
The first atomic bomb on Hiroshima killed, burned, and maimed 194,000 people.
Intellectual debate in this society somehow passes for those who can scream their talking points the loudest over the other. This is done purposely to get a confrontational, emotional reaction from the indoctrinated, and to dissuade the logical and independent thinker from even entering the debate.
No, we're not occupiers. That's the same anti-Semitic argument we've heard over and over again. No, that's the same anti-Semitic argument we've heard over and over and over again.
When there is dissent expressed in the United States against policies of the Israeli government, people here are called anti-Semitic. What is your response to that as an Israeli Jew?
Well, it's a trick. We always use it. When from Europe somebody is criticizing Israel, then we bring up the Holocaust. When in this country people are criticizing Israel, then they are anti-Semitic.
Through this process, the collective is intellectually safe from any challenge to its power. Do your thoughts serve to free you, or simply to make you freely serve? These talking points are created by people who do think about how to control societies. They weave this input-output slave thought into an Hegelian dialectic that they control. They essentially have a society that bickers over issues that have no real importance on the real power of the world. They use hot-button, emotional issues like abortion or gays in the military to divide and conquer us, while they laugh all the way to the bank, march us off to the war, and destroy our Constitution. What about those of us who did not do well in this indoctrination environment? I was one of those kids that did not do very well in school. I knew from a very early age that what was being pumped into my head was not what was going to make me a better person. I knew that the most successful people that I knew did not have jobs or went along with the crowd. Yet our school teaches us to get jobs and do what we were told. I knew that our school system wanted me to learn about sex, drugs, death, multiculturalism, much more than issues that would have driven my success like economics, history, and psychology. They wanted me to drone on senseless and boring topics instead of inspiring me to a higher, better self through art, music, and philosophy. What they were really teaching me was to keep my head down and deal with their system. These days, those that are restless in this indoctrination environment run the risk of being drugged. Thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason why so few engage in it. Henry Ford. One of the greatest challenges to becoming totally free is to be able to think independently from everyone else. You know instinctively no one cares about you as much as you care about yourself.